Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a for fun tier list for all the characters in the bracket of Trailblazer level 40 to 50. So this tier list is absolutely not how the endgame meta is going to be. It's just for a bit of fun and an opportunity for me to give you guys a bit of a discussion around all the characters and how I'm currently feeling about them and what it's kind of looking like on their power level, at least in my opinion. This isn't going to be hardcore, the meta or anything like that, so just treat this as entertainment and maybe a bit of an opportunity to learn some cool things about some of the units. So with the big disclaimer out of the way, and I'm not going to get in trouble anymore, let's get into the tier list and let me rank these units for Trailblazer level 40 to 50. Okay, so first and foremost, let's cover the DPS first. So Sarah, in my opinion, is the best DPS character. She is a hyper carry, and I'm going to be using some terms here which maybe a lot of people aren't familiar with, but I'm going to assume you have a basic understanding of each of the characters. You at least know how they work, but a hyper carry is essentially a character who plays with 3 supports, and Sele is basically the best hyper carry target right now in the game. She can basically take all of the team, all their support, and channel it into one point and just wipe 5 enemies, 4 enemies at a time over and over and over again, and she's fully capable of doing that in the hardest content in the game, the Forgotten Hall. In addition to that, thanks to her quantum penetration, she also can be brought to fights which don't even have quantum vulnerability. She has so much damage and so much potential that she's basically got a 100% use rate right now in Memory of Chaos, Forgotten Hall mode, by players who have been clearing the cutting edge. So she is just that good. And if there was a higher tier here, I'd put her all by herself in a double S tier. She is that crazy here. I don't have that tier though, so she's going to go in S, but just know that if there was another tier, she'd be in it. So for the rest of the DPS, let's take a look at who's next here. The next best DPS, in my opinion, if you construct teams around her correctly, is actually Clara. Now, Clara isn't the best single target damage dealer. If you go ahead and take a look at the damage calcs, which we've got over on Pridewin, you will notice that she's not the most insane damage dealer on single target, but when it comes to AoE, she's kind of unmatched right now when it comes to AoE. Sele is obviously insane at AoE as well, but you can only have one Sele on your teams. And Clara is another good pick for your other team. Now, the reason that Clara is so good is that you have a lot of ways to manipulate her kit. So she does damage by being hit, and there is characters like March 7th, which increases that chance substantially, as well as giving Clara survivability. And there's also characters like Ting Yun, who will give Clara the ability to use her ultimate, which again taunts even more. The cool thing about Clara as well is that she attacks many times per turn. So she's got her counter attack. It attacks pretty much every time she's hit, and she gets hit a lot. And every single time she is attacked, she'll apply on hit effect, and that really synergizes insanely well with Ting Yun. And overall, I think Clara is probably the next best DPS right now behind Sele, if you're able to construct teams perfectly around her with units that are reasonably accessible. March and Ting Yun are both 4 stars. You can get them as a free-to-play player if you pull Clara. So next up, let's talk about the next best DPS in my opinion, which is Yang Qing. So Yang Qing is a bit of a tough one. He actually is incredibly hard to use unless you build and have the right units for him. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in B tier if he was in a vacuum. Like if you didn't have the unit I'm about to talk about and you were just playing him in your free-to-play run through and you were kind of like just going at it. If you're pairing him with like March 7th, it's just going to be a little bit awkward in my opinion, because the teams which you construct with Yang Qing when you play March 7th are likely going to be Yang Qing, March, healer, and a support, and that's already double ice, and you know that's just going to give you pretty bad type coverage, and it does pigeonhole you into using skill points on Yang Qing to shield him pretty often. But Yang Qing in a combination with Japad is a completely different ballgame. So the Memory of Chaos floor 10, which is the hardest content in the game, has been cleared, and Yang Qing actually was used in one of the teams that cleared that. It's also worth noting that the 2 other DPS here were also used, but Yang Qing was being used with Japad. And if you have Japad and you are unaware of Japad's potential, we're going to be talking about him in this video, but Japad is basically a Giga Chad. He is the absolute Giga Chad of shields, and he just provides so many shields and so much potential to taunt that, you know, he just enables Yang Qing. He makes Yang Qing work, and that is probably why Yang Qing is probably going to end up in an A tier for me, just purely from the fact that if you have Japad and you compare him with Yang Qing actually becomes very good. He's quite competitive, he's pretty strong, he's going to freeze. There's a lot on the table for Yang Qing, so I think he's good, and when we get more and more preservation units, I think that he will only see his stocks and more flexibility rise. So I'm going to put him in A tier for now, but just know that if you don't have Japad, he's probably a B tier, and my Yang Qing, for example, I don't have Japad, my Yang Qing's at level 1. So yeah, that's definitely something you need to consider, but Yang Qing, he's there. Remember, this is just for entertainment and a bit of education here, so don't take too much stock in where I'm putting him. Alright, next up, let's cover some more of the DPS here. So I want to cover Hook next. Hook is actually a really good good unit. Part of this is because her Eidolons are super accessible right now and everyone's getting a ton of free pulls on the Sele banner, even if you're free to play. But another part of it is that she's just a really good fire single target damage dealer. She has a dot component, she hits multiple times, she's a pretty good breaker, she can advance her action forward. There's a lot going for her. There's really a lot on the table for Hook, and also there's just not that many DPS options. So the DPS we've already talked about as probably the 3 strongest, one situationally. They're all 5 stars, so there's really not a whole lot on the table for 4-star units in terms of DPS, and Hook definitely has some pretty good numbers for DPS. She also gets access to 2 insane light cones. The full on the Aeon is really good from her to store if you get that and you superimposition 5 it eventually. But then also Wolf Walk Time is insane as well. It's free to play, accessible, and you can get that to superimposition 5 as well, and it's basically made for Hook. So Hook is actually a pretty good unit, and she also does have the potential to be hyper carried as well, although it's way worse than Sele and Clara. She is, she's got some potential. She's not bad. Definitely think she's not too bad there. Next up is Su Shang, if I can find her. So Su Shang, in my opinion, is also A tier, and the reason for that is that she is a physical break themed unit. Physical is actually the best offensive breaking type in the game, and the reason for that is that it appears to deal percentage max life of the enemy with the dot ticks. Don't 100% quote me on that, but that is the way it looks like everyone is saying it works, and that means that she is broken. She also does have access to break effect just in her kit. She will be available on the Jing banner, so if you are planning on pulling for Jing, you're going to end up getting Eidolons for her, and she's already very strong. She's an absolute monster of breaking, and if there's any sort of a physical weak enemy, she's pretty damn good, and you're going to want to be looking into maybe bringing her and building her for those physical weak fights. She's pretty damn strong, man. Definitely an A tier in my opinion. Later on, I think she'll get power crept if we ever get another good physical breaker, but right now she's A tier. She's pretty much the best we've got, and the only other good physical DPS is Clara, and she is a 5-star. All right, let's move on to who is next. So we've got Danheng, Sampo, and Serval. Before I talk about Serval, Danheng, and Sampo in the video, I wanted to add in post here that I think that these units are so close to Hook, Yang Qing, as well as Su Shang, that it's almost indifferentiable. Like, they could all move around in any way, shape, or form, any combination, and it would just be fine with me. So even if Danheng is lower, I think he could easily be swapped with Yang Qing. So don't put too much stock. This is just how I felt at the time of filming this. I felt like the others were just a little bit ahead, but really all of them are fantastic, and they could all honestly be in the same tier. The other 4-star units. So I'm going to talk about all of them here. I think they're all spectacular, just for the record, but they're just not on the level of these guys up here in terms of raw damage output. I think you could make a case for all of them moving up to A tier, at least in my opinion. Like, I personally use Serval pretty much every single fight. She's incredible. I think she's really strong. I just don't think she has quite as much raw output potential as the other DPS characters on this list. So let's talk about these guys down here. So Serval, Sampo, and Danheng can all be played as what's called neutral units. Neutral units are characters who do not need to use their skill every single turn to bring out their full potential. So they're almost like a supporting DPS cast. You can bring them pretty much to any fight, and you can go and pair them with like characters like Hook and Su Shang, because they're not going to need skill points. Danheng can go basic skill, Sampo can go basic skill, and so can Serval, and they'll get a big amount of their damage out of that. In addition to that, all 3 of them are excellent breakers for their type. Danheng is one of the best wind breakers, Sampo is also incredible, and also has that dot component, and Serval also is an insane lightning breaker. Really incredible lightning breaker. Now, what makes them special is something individual. So Serval here is going to be able to perpetuate shocks indefinitely if you have a good gear on her and enough speed, and the reason for that is that her ultimate was changed. Now, instead of just giving you 2 extra turns on shock and setting it to 2, it actually now extends shocks by 2. Essentially, why this is important is if you break an enemy for shock, it's going to be a big shock tick every single turn, and you can perpetuate that shock break tick infinitely, meaning she is really spectacular in long drawn out fights for lightning weak enemies, because you can just break lightning and then infinitely shock them with that break. Sampo is good because he gets, obviously the damage over time component, but he also amplifies other dots, which is pretty strong, and I think it's going to be a lot of use for that in the future. He's also good with Serval. And Danheng is good because he obviously breaks wind, but in addition to that, he also has a slow, which is not to be underestimated. He also does very good damage if you gear him up correctly, and you do play him as a main carry. He just doesn't have quite as much potential as Su Shang does because she's physical, or Hook because she has access to those Eidolons, and is also a little bit of a better hyper carry target than Danheng, at least right now. Now, those are the DPS out of the way. I think you could make a case for all of them moving up to A tier, but I just think that they're a little bit lower on my totem pole right now than these 2, at least for me. All right, moving on to the other DPS here, we've got Arlen. He got nerfed a lot, man. He is just nowhere near as good as Serval. In terms of breaking, in terms of damage, he's actually just lower than Serval. well in most of these cases, so he's got to be in C tier. QQ, I'm not going to say her name. I don't know how to say it. I'm going to call her QQ here. QQ is pretty interesting. I really don't know what to think of her. I'm going to put her in actually mystery mark because I think she could be pretty good. I just haven't had an opportunity to really understand exactly how much damage she's going to deal because her kit is entirely RNG. But if I think I was going to use her, I would use her similar to Serval, Sampo, and Danhang. I'd use her in the neutral role where she's not consuming skill points, but she's not building them. I think that's probably where I would use her. But right now, I don't really know where to put her. I'm going to put her not on the list because I'm not sure. I think that pretty much rounds out our DPS. I think we have Himiko here. Himiko just doesn't seem to be getting as much use. So we did a full breakdown of all the uses of all the characters in Memory of Chaos right now. There was 35 total teams from 10 total players who were doing Memory of Chaos. Himiko did pop up once from one of those players, but overall it seems like Hook is being used more than Himiko right now, and that just has to be coming down to the fact that Hook actually does do more break units of damage on a single target enemy, which is very relevant on bosses, and in addition to that, Hook also does do better single target damage. So if there was ever a fight with 2 enemies though that were weak to fire, or there was a lot of enemies that were weak to fire, I think Himiko has a lot more potential, but right now it just seems like Hook is a little bit more universal, even though Himiko could be way stronger in certain situations. I think Himiko might end up being here, but right now she's going to be in B tier, at least for me. Remember, this is just for fun. All right, I think that's all the DPS here. Oh, we got Trailblazer Physical. I think that they are just, you know, by virtue of being a Trailblazer character and not being fire, they're in C tier. But in addition to that, they're just substantially worse than Su Shang. You can use them in AoE breaking physical scenarios, but for me at least, I just don't see the value in them over the fire Trailblazer, so I'm going to put them in C tier. Also, their damage is a little bit underwhelming compared to other units, and we've already got some pretty stiff competition here on the physical front, so I don't think that they're anywhere near as good as the other 2 physical characters. All right, so I think Herder obviously D tier, you know, it is what it is. Let's move on to the supports next. All right, so we're going to cover the offensive supports and defensive supports first. So we're talking Nihility and we're talking Harmony. So if you take a look at my previous video, which was the Memory of Chaos video, you'll know that the most used and most universal supports right now in terms of offense are going to be Bronya and Tingyun. These guys are basically being used a lot of the time on a lot of teams. You know, if you have Bronya, if you have Tingyun, chances are you're probably going to want to consider at least using them. They are very strong, and I think that they definitely feel like they belong in S tier together. They are just that good. They are that universal. They are that generic. I don't think I really have to talk too much about them. They are really good. Now, a little bit less universal, a little bit less used is going to be Pella and Welt, but they are actually phenomenally strong still. The reason that I think that they're a little bit less used is that Nihility units really do want to be looking into providing their elemental break effect. Unlike Harmony units who basically just spend all their time buffing, you know, Bronya attacks a little bit more, but most of the Nihility units actually have a rotation. They will be hitting the enemy for their element, and that makes them a little bit less generic. A lot of their power does come from the debuffs they provide, which, you know, Pella is the armor shred and Welt is the damage multiplier, as well as the slows and all sorts of stuff going on there, but I think they're just a little bit less universal, and the damage they provide is a little bit less, and Memory of Chaos, which is the Ultra Endgame, is a time trial. Now, I think in a lot of cases, Welt and Pella actually provide more than Bronya and Ting in very sticky situations. Pella can just straight up rip off buffs off of enemies, which is invaluable in a lot of cases, and Welt can, you know, imprison enemies, which is, you know, phenomenal. The amount of imprisoning that he can do is crazy. His technique is one of the best, and, you know, I think Welt is actually very strong, but they're just not as universal as Bronya and Tingyun, so I think that they're going to have to be a tier below, but I think both of them could, you know, eventually, depending on the encounter, see their stocks rise to S as we see and kind of go over time. But both of them are really good. You know, if I had them, I would level them up. Pella on my account is leveled up. If I had Welt, I'd level him. Welt also maybe has some potential to do damage. We have to see and look into that though. He's still a little bit up in the air, but I think Welt actually might have some potential to be damage dealer as well. All right, so I think that pretty much covers all of our. We got Asta here. So Asta, in my opinion, is not as strong as Bronya and Tingyun, and in my opinion, doesn't provide as much, you know, utility as Welt and Pella. I think there's a case to be made for her to be an A. I think you could probably put her in A. Honestly, she is pretty good, but a lot of her kit does revolve around fire weakness, and she won't be bringing out her full potential unless the enemy is weak to fire, and that's why I'm going to penalize her a little bit. I think in fire weak fights, she can even hold a candle to Tingyun and Bronya, but in non-fire weak fights, I think that she's a little bit below Welt and Pella in terms of her value, at least from my perspective. Hopefully you guys think that's a little bit fair there, but, you know, I think that she is a very good unit. She just needs to be in her element in every sense of the word to really perform at the full of her potential. But I think that there is a lot to discover with Asta, so she might move up. We're going to have to see there. All right, so on to the defensive supports here, or the sustaining supports. So Japad, I'm going to talk a bit about Japad here. I think Japad is so underrated, it is crazy. And I think the thing that people don't really realize about him, and I didn't realize about him, is that he's actually going to be attacked very often. Like, he key is Clara levels of getting attacked. So his trace, which increases taunt, is going to be roughly increasing his chance to be attacked by 3 times. So it's really, really good. It's actually like, I think it's closer to 4 times. I haven't done the exact, kind of testing with that. We'll have to see. It's probably roughly about 4 times the chance to get attacked compared to a normal unit. He has preservation, so that it already makes him more higher chance to be attacked. And then you can also put a taunting light cone on him as well to further increase the chance for him to be attacked. Now, why is this relevant? Well, when you get attacked in Star Rail, you generate energy. And what is Jeopard's biggest problem? It's energy generation. And because he's getting attacked so much and people weren't factoring that in, he can actually have his shield up way, way more often than I think a lot of people were realizing. The fact that he just gets hit so much, and the fact that you can actually manipulate him getting hit even more, is going to be the big reason why he's so good. Now, in the Chinese realm, the best teams right now are actually running Jeopard as their sustaining unit solo. He is that crazy. Now, granted, all those Chinese players who are doing Memory of Chaos 10, they've all got E6 Jeopard. I'm not really sure exactly how that changes things, but even the Jeopards, which I've seen here at E0 back in reality, they're pretty damn crazy as well. And if I had to pick one unit, which I don't have, it would either be Bailu or Jeopard, and I would be pretty happy with either of them. So Jeopard is absolutely an S tier in my opinion. He could, I just can't see him not being good, honestly. He is crazy, and I think that once I get him and once I use him, I'm going to be able to talk a lot more about him, but I think he's really, really good. Now, on a similar vein, I think Bailu really is an insane unit here to have on your account. Right now, there's only 2 healers. She's one of them, so she's basically irreplaceable right now. I do think she's better than Natasha as well. She doesn't have a cleanse, but you can bring Bronya or March 7th for the cleanse if you need it. Now, cleanses are very good, but Bailu also does have a lot at her disposal, which Natasha doesn't, which is split up and healing, which is in stages. And that is definitely very strong. Bailu also heals way more. So Bailu, in my opinion, is just a really, really good unit. Overall, big fan of Bailu, and I think that she definitely has a place in S tier. Now, Natasha is also very good. She's just a little bit behind Bailu. Her healing is definitely sufficient, but mechanically, she's not as strong at healing as Bailu. Because Bailu's healing is split up, she can spec even harder into healing and, over-healing characters because she is able to have that invigoration stacks on allies. Natasha is very one-dimensional. When you heal, the heal is done. You have to wait until you have the next one in order to return again. Bailu has residual healing. Natasha, okay, you got the heal over time. It's only on 1 unit, but Natasha is very good. She's got the cleanse. She's just a step below Bailu, in my opinion, and definitely a step below Jeopard in terms of sustain, because Jeopard just prevents all the damage, taunts, and he's got a freeze as well. So I definitely think Natasha has to go below these 2, but don't get me wrong, she's insane. She's very, very good. I think in my previous video, she had 100% play rate, because, healers are just that invaluable, and the other 2 sustaining characters right now are 5 stars. All right, Trailblazer Fire, in my opinion, is S. So Trailblazer Fire has big shields. They're just a little bit different than Jeopard's. So while Jeopard's can be sustained infinitely if you get him in the right scenario, he also doesn't have as much flexibility as, for example, Trailblazer Fire. Trailblazer Fire is also more offensive than Jeopard. So both of them provide great shields. Jeopard provides more shields, but Trailblazer Fire provides good shields, the ability to taunt enemies, which is pretty clutch, like a guaranteed taunt, not a potential taunt, a guaranteed taunt. But in addition to that, the main selling point of Trailblazer Fire is the absolutely ridiculous amount of fire break they deal. They break so much fire, it is ridiculous. I cannot believe they made a unit like this be free to play. Like, I'm happy, but holy moly. And in addition to that, you get all of their Eidolons for free. Trailblazer Fire is absolutely, in my opinion, one of the defining units of 1.0, and I think that they definitely belong in S tier with the Bailu as well as Jeopard there. All right, so we got March 7th here. In my opinion, she's an A tier. March 7th is so good because she is obviously one of those sustaining units. It's a theme. You'll notice that all the sustaining units are in A or higher, and the reason for that is just because you need them. In Trailblazer level 40 to 50, which remember, this is what that tier list is based on, you are going to get smashed in Memory of Chaos, and the only thing which is limiting you is can you survive, and March is going to help you with surviving there. She has freezes, she has shields, she has redirects, she has a pretty good amount of break as well. I think she's a great unit, and Ice is a superb type for a support because it is defensive typing. So I think that March is absolutely an A tier. You can make a case for her going down if you had 2 healers. So if you had Bailu and Natasha, chances are you probably wouldn't need March, but if you don't have Bailu, then you're probably going to be using March on most of your teams. So I think that she is definitely good there. She enables Clara even more so, and she can also be paired with other units as well. So there you go, guys. That is my current tier list here. Jing Yuan's not out, and I just don't have any idea about QQ because I haven't been able to calculate her. So that is kind of where I'm looking at here. Remember, this is just for fun. It's just based on my opinion of how the units are currently playing out, based on what my community thinks, as well as what I think when I'm playing the game. It's entirely possible these units go up and down like a yo-yo as we get higher up into the floors, or more people people get into Memory of Chaos. You know, maybe Dan Hang is going to move up into S tier. Who knows? It's possible. So hopefully you guys have learned a thing or two about some of the units here, and maybe it's giving you guys a bit of an updated and a new look on some of the units. Definitely don't feel bad if you got any of the units here. I think all the units are exceptionally good, maybe with the exception of Herder and Ireland, because they got nerfed so hard over the betas. But you know, overall, I think that a lot of the balance is in a really good place. And if you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Plenty more Star Rail content on the way, and hopefully you guys enjoyed. And until next time, cheers.